My name is Natalie. At Thanksgiving dinner last year, 5 years after Uncle Richard moved to Dubai for his engineering contract, he set down his wine glass, looked across the table at me, and asked the question that made my mother's face go white. "Sweetheart, how's the beach house treating you? I drove by Grandpa's old place in Destin yesterday when I landed. The one he left you in his will. Saw some strangers on the deck." He paused, eyes narrowing. "You renting it out or something?" Before I could even process the words, my sister Madison laughed too loudly. "Oh, Uncle Rich, you've been gone so long. That house is in my name now. Has been for years." Natalie signed it over. My fork clattered against my plate. Mom reached for the cranberry sauce like nothing had happened. "It made more sense for the family, Richard. Madison needed stability. You wouldn't understand since you've been overseas." Uncle Richard didn't touch his food. He just stared at Madison, then at Mom, then at me. His jaw tightened in a way I remembered from childhood, right before he'd catch us lying about who broke the garage window. "Natalie," he said quietly, "did you sign anything?" I opened my mouth, but the words wouldn't come, because the truth was, I had signed something. A stack of documents Mom shoved in front of me 3 years ago when Dad was dying in hospice. Papers, she said, were about the medical bills. I'd been working double shifts, crying in hospital break rooms, barely sleeping. I signed whatever she put in front of me. Uncle Richard pushed back from the table. "Everyone finish eating. Then meet me in the living room. I've got something to show you that's going to change this whole conversation." He walked out without another word. Madison's husband Derek suddenly became very interested in his mashed potatoes. My mother's hands were shaking. And me? I sat there feeling like the floor had just dropped out from under everything I thought I knew about my family. If you've ever discovered that the people you trusted most were the ones stealing from you, drop your story in the comments. Where are you watching from today? Like and subscribe, because what happened next in that living room tore my family apart permanently. And honestly, I'd do it all over again. Let me take you back to where this really started. Grandpa Frank bought that beach house in Destin, Florida, back in 1987. He paid cash from 30 years of working at the paper mill in Alabama, saved every overtime check, and drove down to the coast one Saturday to hand the realtor a cashier's check. The house was nothing fancy back then. 3 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, and a view of the Gulf that made your chest ache with how beautiful it was. I spent every summer there from age 6 until I left for nursing school. Grandpa taught me how to fish off the pier, how to identify shells, how to sit in silence and just watch the pelicans dive. Madison came too, sometimes, but she always complained about the sand and the humidity. She'd stay inside watching TV while Grandpa and I walked the shoreline at sunset. When Grandpa got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer the year I turned 22, I drove down every weekend I wasn't working, held his hand through chemo, cleaned the house when he was too weak. Madison visited twice, once for an hour on Christmas, once when Mom guilted her into coming for his birthday. The week before he died, Grandpa called me into his bedroom. His voice was barely a whisper by then. "This house goes to you, Natalie. It's already in the will. The lawyer has everything. You're the one who loved it like I did." He squeezed my fingers with whatever strength he had left. "Don't let anyone take it from you. Promise me." I promised. 2 days later, he was gone. The will was read in a lawyer's office in Pensacola. Grandpa left the beach house solely to me, along with a small savings account to cover property taxes for the first few years. Madison got his car and some furniture. Mom got his life insurance policy, about $40,000. Madison threw a fit in the parking lot afterward, screamed that it wasn't fair, that I was always Grandpa's favorite, that I manipulated a dying old man. Mom tried to calm her down. "Honey, maybe Natalie will share. Maybe you two can work something out." I said nothing, just got in my car and drove back to Birmingham, where I was finishing my last semester of nursing school. That was 6 years ago. The beach house became my sanctuary. I drove down once a month on my days off, kept up with repairs, replaced the roof when Hurricane Sally damaged it. I never rented it out because it wasn't about money. It was about Grandpa, about keeping his memory alive. Then Dad got sick. Stage 4 lung cancer. Diagnosed in March, gone by October. Those 7 months were the hardest of my life. I was working as an ICU nurse at UAB, watching strangers die every shift, then driving to my parents' house to watch my own father fade away. Madison barely showed up. She'd gotten married 2 years earlier to Derek, this guy who always had some new business idea that never panned out. Cryptocurrency trading, dropshipping, a CBD store that lasted 4 months. They lived in a nice house in Hoover that I later learned was mortgaged to the ceiling. Mom handled all of Dad's paperwork. She said it was easier that way, that I had enough on my plate. I was grateful, too grateful to ask questions. One night, about a week before Dad passed, Mom came to me in the hospice hallway with a manila folder. "I need you to sign these, honey. Medical authorizations, power of attorney updates, some insurance stuff. The lawyer says it's urgent." I was running on 4 hours of sleep and pure grief. My hands were shaking from too much coffee. I didn't read a single page. I just signed wherever she pointed and went back to sit with Dad. He died on a Tuesday. I held his hand until it went cold. The next few months were a blur. I threw myself into work. Extra shifts, overtime, anything to stay busy. I didn't go to the beach house for almost a year because every time I thought about it, I thought about Grandpa, and then I thought about Dad, and the grief was too heavy to carry. When I finally drove down to Destin the following October, I noticed the first strange thing. The lockbox code on the back door had been changed. I called Mom. "Hey, did you change the code at Grandpa's house?" She paused too long before answering. "Oh, Madison's been going down there sometimes. She probably updated it for safety. I'll get you the new one." She texted me the code an hour later. I let myself in and found the second strange thing. My grandmother's quilt was gone. The one she'd hand-stitched in 1962 that always hung over the back of the living room couch. In its place was a modern throw blanket from Target, tags still attached. The kitchen had been reorganized. My coffee maker replaced with a Keurig. The pantry stocked with Madison's favorite snacks. In the master bedroom closet, I found women's clothes that weren't mine. Sundresses, sandals, a whole drawer of Madison's husband's golf shirts. I called Madison immediately. "Why is your stuff all over Grandpa's house?" She sighed, like I was being dramatic. "Natalie, relax. Derek and I have been using it on weekends. You never go down there anymore. It was just sitting empty. You could have asked. It's not a big deal. God, you're so territorial. It's just a house. Just a house. The house Grandpa saved 30 years to buy. The house he left to me in his will. The house I promised to protect." I should have pushed harder. I should have demanded answers right then. But I was still drowning in grief, still working 60-hour weeks, still too tired to fight. So, I let it go. That was my first mistake. The bills started appearing the next spring. Not at my apartment in Birmingham, but forwarded from the Destin address. Property tax notices that seemed higher than usual. Then a letter from a bank I'd never heard of. Something about an equity line payment being due. I called Mom. "There's some weird mail coming from the beach house. Something about an equity line?" "Oh, don't worry about that. Madison's handling the property finances now. She's so good with numbers." "Why would Madison be handling anything? It's my house." Another too long pause. "Honey, we talked about this. Remember? After your father passed, we all agreed it made sense for Madison to take over, since she has more time." We had never talked about this. I would remember a conversation about my inheritance. But Mom's voice was so certain, so casual, that I started doubting my own memory. Maybe I'd been so out of it during those hospice months that I'd agreed to something I couldn't recall. I asked Mom to send me the paperwork. She said she'd look for it. Weeks passed. The paperwork never came. The requests for money started that summer. Madison called me crying on a Wednesday night. "Derek's business is in trouble. We might lose the house. I just need $8,000 to get through this rough patch. I'll pay you back next month. I swear." I transferred the money because she was my sister. Because Mom kept texting me about how worried she was about Madison's marriage. Because I thought helping family was what good people did. Next month became next season. Then Derek's car got repossessed, and Madison needed $5,000 for a replacement. Then their credit card debt was out of control, and could I just help with the minimums for a few months? In 18 months, I sent my sister over $32,000. I told myself I'd be paid back eventually. I told myself the beach house was still generating imaginary value, that my future was secure even if my present was being drained. Then Uncle Richard came home from Dubai. Uncle Richard was Dad's younger brother. They'd been close as kids but drifted apart when Richard got a job with an international engineering firm. He'd spent the last 15 years building bridges and dams in the Middle East, Africa, Southeast Asia. I barely knew him. He came back for Dad's funeral but left the day after, something about a project deadline in Abu Dhabi. What I didn't know was that before he left, he'd asked Dad's lawyer to send him copies of any legal documents involving the family. Something about Dad's dying wish to keep an eye on things. For 5 years, Uncle Richard had been quietly receiving updates, deed transfers, lien recordings, mortgage applications. He watched from 8,000 miles away as my family slowly stole everything Grandpa left me. He finally retired last fall. Flew into Pensacola the day before Thanksgiving, drove straight to the Destin courthouse to pull the property records himself, and what he found made him cancel his hotel reservation and drive 4 hours north to confront my mother in person. Back to that living room. We gathered on the couches like we were about to have a normal family discussion. Uncle Richard stood by the fireplace, a thick folder in his hands. "I'm going to ask this once," he said, voice steady. "I want honest answers. Natalie, when was the last time you checked the deed on your grandfather's house?" I don't know. Years ago, before Dad got sick." He nodded slowly. Then he opened the folder and spread papers across the coffee table. "The deed was transferred to Madison and Derek 18 months ago, right around the time your father was in hospice." He tapped a document. "Here's the signature page. Is this your handwriting, Natalie?" I looked at my name scrawled across the line. It was close to my signature but wrong. The loop on the N was too tight. The final E trailed off differently than I write it. I don't remember signing this." "Because you didn't." Uncle Richard's eyes moved to my mother. "The notary who stamped this document is Margaret Henson. Diane, isn't that your friend from the church committee?" My mother's face went gray. Madison jumped in, voice shrill. "This is ridiculous. Natalie was a mess back then. She probably just doesn't remember. She signed over the house because she knew Derek and I needed it more. She was barely using it. Was she also barely using the $240,000 in equity loans you took out against the property?" Uncle Richard laid out bank statements, because these show the money going directly into accounts controlled by Derek. Online trading platforms, mostly. Crypto exchanges. Derek stood up. "I don't have to listen to this. We're leaving." "Sit down." Uncle Richard's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "There's more." He pulled out a final document. "A foreclosure notice dated 3 weeks ago. The house is 90 days behind on the equity loan payments. The bank is starting proceedings. If something isn't done in the next 60 days, the property goes to auction." My chest felt like it was collapsing. "What?" "They took your house, borrowed almost $250,000 against it, lost the money gambling on crypto, and now they're about to lose the house entirely." Uncle Richard looked at Madison with something close to disgust. "Did I miss anything?" Madison started crying. The dramatic, heaving sobs she'd perfected as a child whenever she got caught doing something wrong. "You don't understand the pressure we've been under. Derek's business ideas just needed more time. We were going to pay everything back. We were going to fix it. With what money?" I finally found my voice. "You've been taking money from me for the past 2 years. Telling me Derek's business was struggling. I sent you over $30,000. That was different." "How? How was that different?" Mom tried to intervene. "Girls, please. This is a family matter. We can work this out without lawyers, without courts. Richard, you've been gone for years. You don't understand how we do things." Uncle Richard laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I understand perfectly, Diane. You forged your daughter's signature, stole her inheritance, and enabled your other daughter's husband to gamble it away. And when it all started falling apart, you convinced Natalie to keep sending money so you could cover the payments a little longer." He gathered the papers back into his folder. "Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow morning, I'm taking Natalie to meet with a real estate attorney I've already contacted. We're going to file to have the fraudulent deed transfer reversed. And then we're going to explore criminal charges against everyone involved in the forgery." "You can't do this," Madison's voice cracked. "We're family. You stopped being family the moment you stole from your sister." Uncle Richard turned to me. "Natalie, pack a bag. You're staying at my hotel tonight. We've got a lot to discuss." I walked past my mother without looking at her. Past Madison, still crying on the couch. Past Derek, who wouldn't meet my eyes. I packed a bag from my old bedroom and walked out of that house. I haven't been back since. The attorney Uncle Richard found was named Patricia Webb. She'd spent 20 years handling real estate fraud cases along the Gulf Coast and had a reputation for being absolutely relentless. We sat in her office the Monday after Thanksgiving, spreading documents across her conference table. "This is actually more straightforward than many cases I see," she said, highlighting sections of the forged deed. "The signature is clearly inconsistent. The notary violated multiple protocols. She never verified your identity in person because she couldn't have since you weren't there. And we have evidence that you were working a documented shift at the hospital during the time the signing supposedly occurred." "I pulled your schedule from UAB," Uncle Richard added. "You were in the ICU for 12 hours the day this deed was notarized. 40 witnesses can verify you never left the floor." Patricia nodded. "We file a quiet title action to void the fraudulent transfer. Simultaneously, we pursue civil fraud charges against your sister, her husband, and potentially your mother as co-conspirators. The forged notarization gives us grounds for criminal referral as well." "What about the foreclosure? Once the deed is voided, the loans attached to it become the responsibility of whoever took them out. Your sister and her husband signed as borrowers. They owe the bank $240,000, not you." I thought about Madison's nice house in Hoover, the one already mortgaged to the ceiling. About Derek's failed businesses and empty promises. About my mother, who had looked me in the eye while Dad was dying and handed me papers that would sign away my inheritance. "Do it," I said. "All of it." The lawsuit was filed before Christmas. Madison and Derek were served at their house on New Year's Eve. Mom got her papers the same day. The harassment began immediately. Madison left voicemails alternating between rage and desperation. "You're destroying our lives. Derek's going to leave me. Mom is having panic attacks. How can you do this to your own family?" Mom sent long emails about forgiveness and Christian values, about how Grandpa would be ashamed of me for tearing the family apart over just a house. I saved every message. Patricia said they might be useful later. Discovery took 4 months. We subpoenaed bank records, text messages, emails. The evidence was damning. Text from Mom to Madison, dated 2 weeks before Dad died. Got Natalie to sign the papers. She didn't even look at them, too upset about her father to notice anything. Email from Derek to a crypto trading forum, 3 months after the deed transfer. Just unlocked $200K in equity from the wife's family property. Ready to go all in on this altcoin play. Messages between Madison and the notary. Coordinating a date when they knew I'd be working so they could forge the signature without me present. Patricia's handwriting expert testified that the signature on the deed showed 23 distinct differences from my authentic writing samples. The notary, facing the loss of her license and possible criminal charges, eventually admitted she'd never met me. She'd stamped the document as a favor to her friend Diane. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Madison took the stand and cried about financial pressure, about feeling like the unfavored daughter, about how I'd always been Grandpa's golden child. The jury didn't seem moved. Derek tried to claim he didn't know the deed transfer was fraudulent. Then Patricia produced the text messages where he'd discussed getting the beach house into our names weeks before the forged signing. Mom refused to testify, citing her Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. On a Thursday morning in late spring, the judge read the verdict. The court finds the 2021 deed transfer to be fraudulent and void ab initio. Title to the Destin property is hereby restored to plaintiff Natalie Marie Collins as sole owner. Defendants Madison Collins Wright and Derek Wright are jointly and severally liable for all loans and encumbrances they placed against the property. Defendant Diane Collins is found liable as co-conspirator in the fraudulent transfer. Madison collapsed into sobs. Derek's lawyer was already whispering about bankruptcy options. The judge wasn't finished. Additionally, the court refers this matter to the state attorney's office for investigation of potential criminal charges including forgery, notary fraud, and grand theft. The notary's commission is permanently revoked. I sat completely still as the courtroom emptied. Uncle Richard squeezed my shoulder. "Grandpa would be proud of you." I finally let myself cry. The aftermath played out over the following months. The bank foreclosed on Madison and Derek's house in Hoover. They couldn't keep up with those payments and the $240,000 debt from my beach house at the same time. Last I heard, they were renting an apartment in a not great part of town. Derek finally got a real job at a warehouse. Madison works at a department store. Mom had to sell the house she'd shared with Dad to cover her portion of the legal judgments. She lives in a small condo now. She's sent letters through an intermediary, asking if we can reconcile. I haven't responded. The notary, Margaret Henson, pled guilty to forgery charges and received 2 years probation plus a permanent ban from any notary activities. Her name is in the state database as a convicted fraudster. I kept the beach house. I drove down to Destin the week after the verdict, used my own code for the lockbox, walked through every room, touching the walls Grandpa had painted, looking out the windows at the Gulf he loved so much. Madison's stuff was gone, cleared out by order of the court. I found a few of my own things in boxes in the garage. The quilt was there, thank God. She hadn't sold it. I hung it back over the couch where it belonged. That evening, I sat on the wraparound porch and watched the sunset paint the water gold and pink. I thought about the $32,000 I'd sent my sister, money I'd never see again. I thought about my mother's steady voice telling me to sign papers in a hospice hallway. I thought about all the times I'd doubted myself, wondered if I really was being selfish for wanting to keep what was mine. I thought about what Uncle Richard said at the hotel that first night after Thanksgiving. Your grandfather told me once that he worried about you. Not because you weren't strong, but because you were too kind. He said people like you get taken advantage of because they can't imagine their own family would hurt them. He was right. I couldn't imagine it. Not until I was staring at the evidence spread across a coffee table, watching my mother's face go pale with guilt. The hardest lesson I learned through all of this wasn't about real estate law or forged signatures. It was about the difference between love and enabling, between helping family and letting them destroy you. I gave and gave and gave because I thought that's what good daughters and sisters did. I ignored warning signs because I didn't want to believe the people I loved were capable of betrayal. I signed papers without reading them because I trusted my mother more than I trusted my own judgment. Never again. Uncle Richard visits the beach house a few times a year now. He finally retired for real, bought a little condo in Pensacola. We've gotten close in a way we never were when I was younger. He tells me stories about Dad as a kid, about Grandpa as a young man. He fills in gaps that my mother and sister spent years trying to erase. Last month, he helped me install a new security system. Cameras, smart locks, the works. Not because I'm worried about break-ins, but because I'm done being naive. Protecting yourself isn't paranoid. It's necessary. I still work as an ICU nurse. Still pick up extra shifts when we're short-staffed. But I've learned to say no when I need to. I've learned that taking care of myself isn't selfish. I've learned that boundaries aren't walls. They're just doors with locks, and I get to decide who has the key. Some nights, I drive down to Destin after a rough shift, pull into that crushed shell driveway at 2 a.m., let myself into the house that my grandfather built with 30 years of overtime checks, and just breathe. I make coffee in my own coffee maker, wrap myself in my grandmother's quilt, watch the stars fade over the Gulf as the sun comes up. And I remember what Uncle Richard said at the end of the trial, after Madison stormed out and Mom shuffled away without looking at me. Family isn't blood, it's loyalty. It's showing up when things are hard. It's protecting each other instead of exploiting each other. He paused at the courtroom door. Your grandfather knew the difference. That's why he left the house to you. The people who took advantage of me have lost almost everything. Their homes, their reputations, their relationships with me. I'm supposed to feel bad about that. Sometimes, late at night, I almost do. Then I remember the forged signature, the stolen equity, the lies told while my father was dying. And I don't feel bad anymore. I feel free. The beach house is mine now. Completely, legally, permanently mine. I've updated the deed, changed all the passwords, established a trust so nothing like this can ever happen again. Uncle Richard is listed as backup executor. Patricia Webb is on speed dial. Last week, I got a letter from Madison's lawyer. She's asking me to drop the remaining civil judgments so they can recover financially. She wants a fresh start for her family. I wrote back one sentence. You should have thought about fresh starts before you stole from me. Then I drove to Destin, sat on my grandfather's porch, and watched the pelicans dive into the water he loved. Some people will call me cold, unforgiving, harsh. Those people have never had their family forge their signature, steal their inheritance, and lie to their face while their father was dying. I'm not cold. I'm finally warm. I'm finally safe. I'm finally home. And I'm never letting anyone take that from me again. Love you bigger than the sky, Grandpa. The porch light is on, and this time, it's staying on for me.